In the process of writing your own life story, how do you deal with life's unexpected twists and turns that force you into uncharted territories? This was a question I was confronted with in my final year of university. A month after I submitted my final assignment, I didn't have a graduate job lined up, and a situation I tried to avoid. This was also partly my fault. There were a few job offers, fast-track interviews that I had declined. For some unexplainable reason, these offers just didn't feel right, and I couldn't confidently say that these prospective fields of work would intrigue me. Fundamentally, internally, I was dealing with this internal battle of simply not knowing what the right career choice was. And if I did have an inkling of what I wanted to do, those doors were firmly shut. At the age of 20, I still only knew and still only know a very small fraction of myself, and yet a decision I wasn't ready to make had to be made about my future career choice. What was the next chapter of my life going to say? In a remarkable twist of events, I miraculously landed my first grown-up job at Warner Media, now known as Warner Brothers Discovery, in the space of a week. For the duration of my 2 years there in the internal communications team, my role was to assist in the delivery of their communications and engagement strategy in the UK with the aim of inspiring and motivating employees. To put it simply, I like to think that I was the internal journalist and fun ambassador of the company. Honestly, I stumbled into this role with very little understanding of what the field of communications entailed, or even an understanding of what the technicalities of my role actually looks like day to day. For me, entering the entertainment industry was entering uncharted territories. For one, it didn't feel like a safe corporate job, crazy, I know, but growing up as a first-generation professional, I was aspiring to become a lawyer, a typical traditional corporate role. According to the Higher Education Policy Institute report, first and family students are more inclined to choose degree subjects and career pathways with a seemingly more straightforward route into the labour market. The reasons for this are extensive and complex, but for me, I can definitely say that one of the motivating factors was this awareness and need to be in a financially stable role for the sake of my family. Secondly, growing up for portions of my life, I didn't have a TV growing up, a decision purposely made by my mother. And when we did have a TV at home, I grew up in a religious household, by the way, shows like Harry Potter, WB Classic were prohibited because of its inclusion of magic. So what was I doing at Warner Brothers Discovery? And more importantly, more pertinent to this talk, what did I learn about the power of storytelling at one of the world's leading storytelling powerhouses? The entertainment industry, with its glamorous facade, is notoriously enigmatic. It entices us with riveting narratives and breathtaking visuals and interview snippets of larger-than-life characters and celebrity gossip, all the while leaving us curious about its secrets. Whilst we can all agree we don't know what happens behind the scenes, we are all in some way, shape, or form impacted by this world and its ability to tell compelling narratives. Most of you have probably heard the phrase, a very cliche phrase, the power of storytelling. But what does it mean to experience its significance in our lives? And I think I want to start off by kind of noting and highlighting to you all that when we're discussing the phrase the power of storytelling, it's important to note that it is defined by power. Storytelling is defined by power. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie delivered a poignant TED talk called The Power of a Single Story, in which she details that power, as it pertains to storytelling, is not just about telling someone else's story. It's about making it that person or that group's definitive story in society. She goes on to quote the poet Mourid Barghouti, who says that if you want to dispose of a people, all you need to do is tell their story for them. Film authorship is a realm where power dynamics and systemic structures influence how stories are told on the big screen. The entertainment industry, like many other industries, is not immune to systemic inequalities. From casting decisions to script development, racial and gender biases influence how stories are told. And over the last few years, we've seen attempts by directors to present and portray stories of those from diverse communities on the big screen. However, these attempts have often been myopic, tone deaf to what those from minority backgrounds actually need, want, and expect to see. How can a society embrace its full potential when it stifles the creativity and innovation that diverse narratives bring to the cultural discourse? Fast forward to the events surrounding the death of, a tragic murder, in fact, of George Floyd. conversations around film authorship gained unprecedented momentum, and there was this understanding that this need to appeal to those from diverse audience was not just a purely economically beneficial thing to do. Entertainment organizations had a moral responsibility, a greater sense of a moral responsibility to commit to diversity off and on the screen. One of the questions and paradox they were trying to resolve was, how can we commission diverse content when our internal workforce lacks diversity? And I'll touch on that a bit later on. And it was against this backdrop that I joined the company. One of the very first editorial projects I had the privilege of leading was focused on showcasing and celebrating the company's diverse content library. This was a huge privilege, and honestly, it became like my work baby, a labor of love. I had the privilege of interviewing directors and actors from diverse backgrounds who were entering uncharted territories in the entertainment industry. When it came down to pitching content I wanted to profile for our internal workforce, two of the requirements I had were, one, it had to focus on a group within society who had traditionally been overlooked in the media and entertainment industry, so a marginalized group. And number two, the actor, the director, the producers had to come from diverse backgrounds. And one common thread that united all of these amazing trailblazers was their commitment to changing the narrative of those in society who are stigmatized and changing their narrative within their industry. Rather than conforming to the expectation to craft simplistic narratives of their lived experiences, these visionaries were offering up nuanced, complex stories that told a different narrative. They were willing to look into the struggles of their characters, delving into their battle with their inner demons and their fight for authenticity, and confronting their fears. These stories all radiated authenticity, vulnerability, and a resilience. And one show that particularly stood out to me that I had the privilege of profiling was the HBO Asia show Invisible Stories by Le Jian. It's a tale of tragedy and triumph of migrant workers living in Singapore's public housing community, Sungai Merah. And each 30-minute clip looked at an array of characters, from a construction worker looking to build their home to an aspiring social media influencer who will stop at nothing to capture content in exchange for fame. For viewers in Sungai Merah and in neighboring areas or areas similar to the public housing communities, my hope is that by seeing their stories being retold on the big screen, they had their lived experiences, their unique lived experiences validated and affirmed. And I think that's part of the power and magic of storytelling and why representation is so important. There's something extremely cathartic and comforting about watching a character on the big screen act out your emotions, your experiences, your inner thoughts. And there's this kind of narrative that's communicated to us that our stories matter, that someone out there understands us. We are seen, we're heard, and we belong. And most importantly, that we're not alone. I want to shift our focus onto the power of storytelling as it pertains to education. And midway through my time at Warner Brothers, I expressed a desire to actually get involved in more diversity, equity-related projects, which landed me on a data collection project looking at our internal workforce, its makeup, and levels of diversity internally. As we brainstormed and ideated ways in which we could ensure colleagues would actually submit their data, one colleague suggested we look at the Human Library as an engagement tool. The Human Library are a non-profit organization who give people the chance to explore real people, known as human books, with real experiences. Each human book is a volunteer from a member of a marginalized group, and I had the privilege of reading 2 human books with very impactful and unique stories. The first was of a woman with dyslexia who detailed and gave an incredibly inspiring account of her story amidst the triumph and the accolades and how she kind of overcame this particular condition. And the second was of a woman with a debilitating physical condition that had developed later on in life. She gave an intimate and raw account of her story, and the envelope that silenced that call, the virtual library, reflected the profound and challenging transformations she had undergone in her new normal. For the duration of those 2 hours, it was nothing short of sobering. It gave me the chance to empathize, to connect and to imagine as I read these living books. It taught me that when we embrace the art of storytelling, we have the power to become educators. We can break down barriers and walls of misunderstanding, forge connections that run deep, and create communities that resonate with meaning. But it also got me thinking about the power of storytelling as a tool for education, but specifically those of minority backgrounds. Is it an effective way to learn more about their lived experiences? And whilst it has been done before and there are strengths to it, I kind of want to propose that there are some drawbacks that need to be highlighted. For one, not everyone from a minority background who shares their story wants to hold the position of educator. It is already emotionally taxing to have to retell difficult aspects of your story and consequently relive it, and thus adding the double burden of education, I think, is quite inconsiderate. Secondly, it's quite naive to assume that with the plethora of lived experience testimonies out there of people from diverse backgrounds, that people are going to leave wanting to bring about reformation and change and leave more enlightened. Some people, as we know today, are still woefully obtuse and ignorant of other experiences. And number three, I think not every show of authenticity is an opportunity to grasp onto it. I think people, especially those from minority backgrounds, need to have the opportunity to be able to be their most authentic self without having to create an audience for the purpose of education. Reflecting on my time at Warner Brothers Discovery, I'm so aware and cognizant that the power of storytelling as a force is not just limited to the big screen. It's a deeply transformative force that has the power to change our own personal lives. If I were to reflect upon my time there as though it was a book or as though it was a film, I would say that the biggest lesson I learned was that when entering uncharted territories, you have the power and the ability to make the story a good story. Yes, some unexpected things may occur, that's part of life, but fundamentally it's down to your perspective and your vision for that next chapter, which may look daunting and unknown to you, to determine the quality of that story. When I accepted my offer to go into Warner Brothers, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But one thing is for sure, I knew I wanted to learn, and that was evident. I have since then closed that chapter of my life, and I can confidently say that I've left much more full and richer than when I first entered. I've made friends out of colleagues, learned more about myself and other people. But more importantly, I can confidently say that I'm just a tiny bit more sure about what I want the next chapter of my life to look like. Thank you for listening.